Hey there, I'm going to cover some quick tips about using Illustrator to get vectors into Photoshop. This way, if you have to scale something up using a smart object, it looks nice and crisp in Photoshop. And if you're going to do a lot of scaling animations in After Effects, you should think about a vector workflow or incorporating Photoshop first and then some vector elements in After Effects, because when you scale up a vector in After Effects, as long as you check that little box, and I'll show you where that is, your vectors will always look nice and crisp. This is a similar Photoshop setup like in the previous video. And let's say I'm going to make a new layer. Let me pick a color. And just like the video, what if you want a happy volcano to live somewhere here? Now, you can use clip art, but you also can use Illustrator to create vectors. All right, here I am in Illustrator. These are my layers, and here's the generate. Okay, time to make a volcano, hopefully, because I'm going to use generative AI. If you have clip art that you found online, that could be a great shortcut. If you're into Illustrator, you could definitely draw it out, and you'll be a lot more control. Calling this layer volcano, then click on this button. If you don't see generate there, you would find it under properties, a peaceful volcano, because I'm trying to avoid lava on a small island without any background. Click on generate. Well, this one's interesting, not quite what I'm going for. Maybe this, and I'll just cut off the top of that. If I want more generations, I can click here. Roll the dice one more time. Well, it's looking like Illustrator's interpretation or Firefly's interpretation of peaceful is different than my interpretation of peaceful, though I can work with this one. I'm going to scale it up a little bigger. And let's make it a little more peaceful and remove the ocean, since that's going to be handled in the parallax part of the project. I'm just double-clicking until I get this layer isolated right there, and press the delete key. Well, that worked out well. Same thing for top. Oops, too much. Double-click. Double-click. You might have to do this a few times. Click. Okay, we're almost there. Recolorization of this, so this way it doesn't look like lava is coming down. So I'm just clicking a few times, pick up the color picker, and let me pick this color right here. And I'll continue doing that for the rest of this volcano. Right, that's a lot more peaceful. You can continue correcting it. This is my volcano on one layer. I'm going to marquee select it. I have the selection tool here, copying it. And now, jumping to Photoshop, going to, oh, wow, I forgot how bad this drawing was. Sorry about that, folks. When I paste, edit paste, use Command V to paste, I'm going to use Smart Object, because Smart Objects retain their vectorness. So I'm going to first replace this bad. I apologize for that, totally. Don't know what I was thinking. So I'm going to hide it like this. Throw out my drawing, of course. That makes me feel a lot better. Since it's a smart object, two things. I could scale it a lot bigger, and it'll still look smooth out on screen. Let me undo that. It also means if you need to edit it again, you could double-click the smart object, and it'll open up in Illustrator so you have that flexibility. Now, my vector object should be behind my frame, and I could give it a better name than Vector Smart, just volcano. And you could continue building your scene from here. This goes into After Effects, just like in the previous video. This layer will show up, but it's going to not retain its vectorness. And so if you try to scale it bigger in After Effects, you'll see rasterization. I'm going to Illustrator. Now, an alternative workflow would be to do everything within Illustrator, just like the video shows, creating this composition with the parallax setup layers in After Effects. And it's totally valid to do it in Illustrator as well. Why use Photoshop? Connects into many different workflows. Let me call this my social. So there's good reasons to use Photoshop, especially when working with other people, because that's the go-to tool. Here, I can duplicate what's going on. I have my frame layer, which is just a frame drawn around my layer. If I click on the artboard tool right there and just click on it once and then go under properties, you can rescale. This is like in Photoshop when we increase the canvas size. I can increase this as well, 2120. You can treat this workflow just like the workflow of Photoshop. The advantage, which I'll show you in a moment, is when you go into After Effects, and I'll show you a side-by-side comparison. So I'm saving this, and let me go to the Photoshop version, and I'll save this. File, save as, and I'll call it the same thing, social. And now let me open After Effects and do a side-by-side comparison. Okay, here we are in After Effects. Save your project, File, Save As, and this could be my social test. I'm going to import both of those files, the Photoshop file and the Illustrator file. File, Import, File. I'm selecting the social.psd, making sure not footage, but composition, and click on Open. Editable layer styles, have that checked. Now when I double click, everything comes in just like in Photoshop. We could do side-by-side comparison. There it is in Photoshop. Here it is in After Effects. Here's where the difference will be. Here's my volcano. That's a smart object, but smart object does not translate into After Effects. And what this means, when I scale up this object, S key to scale, eventually you will see pixel resolution happening. See how pixelated that is? That's just the way rasterized images are. There's only so much information in there. Let me now do the same thing with the Illustrator file. File, Import, File, selecting so for the import as, it's going to be composition. Click on Open. And let me go in here. And I'm going to then zoom in. Now, this volcano layer, if you click on this button for continuous rasterization, right there for that piece of vector art, when I scale it, S key, and just increase it, you're going to see that there's no pixelation. So that would be the advantage of using vector art over rasterized art from Photoshop. You could use mix and match. Of course, you could drop in an Illustrator file into After Effects for anything that you do plan to scale up and down. That way you can still use the Photoshop workflow. If you're very into vector art, you know you might be scaling in and out objects like this. Using Illustrator as your templated workflow, keep your graphics nice and crisp. Otherwise, it's exactly the same workflow templates that you're setting up, as you can see. The only difference, vector art, scaling up vector art versus rasterized images. No matter what application you're using, you follow the same process of setting up your templates and getting them into your animation, your motion design application.